Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar presenting our latest report, A Pathway to Zero-Emission Trucking in India, Setting the Framework. My name is Malathi Fernando, and I manage the International Transport Forum's projects on decarbonising transport in India within our research center, and so it's my pleasure to be moderating this webinar today. Thank you for joining us. Will be a 30-minute quick webinar that will give you a taste of the main findings of this report and give you a chance to ask the authors questions. This study was done as part of the NDC Transport Initiative for Asia, which is a project that is funded by the International Climate Initiative. And we are delighted to have partnered for this specific study with our colleagues from the UC Davis India ZEV Research Center. So you'll be hearing from them in just a few minutes. They authored the study and will be presenting some of their main findings. It's a topic that was developed in partnership with Niti Aayog, the public policy think tank of the government of India. And it came up in discussions, and it's a priority focus because freight, of course, is an undoubtedly important sector in terms of economic development, access to goods, global trade. It's a significant employer. But according to ITF modeling, freight is on track to grow its CO2 emissions and become the largest share of the global transport emissions by 2050. In part, this is due to a lack of policy attention that it has received in the previous decades. Our estimates suggest that in Asia, freight demand in terms of ton kilometers will almost triple between 2020 and 2050. This 30-year time frame, this growth during the 30-year time frame is largely driven by population and economic growth. India has already seen rapid growth in this sector in recent decades. So the question of how we meet this demand will determine our environmental and economic outcomes, and which is precisely why the study is meant to support India's existing efforts and growing efforts in tackling road freight through the deployment of low and zero-emission trucks. So to learn a little bit more, I'm very happy to introduce you to Rijul Ladha, who is one of the authors from the UC Davis India ZEV Research Center, who will walk us through the key findings. And during his presentation, we encourage you to use the Q&A function to send in your questions, and we'll be sure to get to them in a few minutes after the presentation. So Rijul, welcome.
Here at UC Davis, and I'll be taking you briefly through the main findings of our study on the pathway to zero-emission trucking in India. So this is just a brief outline of the presentation. So just to give you a context about the India's road freight landscape. So India is one of the fastest growing road freight movement country, which posted a compounded annual growth rate of 10%, which is one of the highest among the major economies of the world. And India moves 70% of its freight through road. And this demand is going to more than triple in the next 25 years. And medium and heavy duty trucks, that is the trucks above a gross vehicle weight of 3.5 tons, are the majority carriers of road freight in India. Though they constitute only about 2% of the annual vehicle sales, but they contribute to about 40% of the CO2 emissions from the road sector. So this gives a prerogative to decarbonize the medium and heavy duty road freight sector in India if we have to meet our climate targets. So we did a global review of the total cost of ownership studies in our for our study, and we came to the conclusion that the electric trucks are going to become cost competitive with diesel trucks starting 2030 around the globe. And this comprises of studies from the three major markets of road freight, that is the US, EU, and China. The TCO of heavy-duty electric trucks would be about 12% cheaper in 2030 than diesel. and about 30% cheaper than fuel cell electric trucks. The upfront cost, which is one of the key barriers for adoption of electric trucks, is also expected to come down by 55% by 2030 from the present. And this global review clearly shows that electric trucks emerge as the dominant alternative fuel technology as at the moment. So with this global review, in context, we did a TCO analysis for India across 4 truck segments of heavy duty trucks: 12 ton, 18 ton, 28, and a 55 tonner. So the 12 ton and 18 ton were selected due to their uh, use case of FMCG, which has a mid-mile and a long-haul application and has emerged as a early mover sector for deploying electric trucks. The 55 tonner is undergoing the electric 55 tonner trucks are undergoing pilots in India in the cement and steel industries and have electric models available in the market. The 28 tonner application for municipal solid waste is considered appropriate because of its closed loop and short haul application for deploying electric trucks. And we used the WRI UC Davis tool to do the techno-economic analysis of these truck segments. On doing the analysis, the top graph is for the model year 2023 and the bottom graph is for the model year 2030. We came to the conclusion that for 2023, as we can see from the graph, the TCO for battery electric 55 tonner and the 18 tonner is only about 5% and 25% higher than their diesel equivalent. And this is without any incentives being considered during the analysis. And when we come to the model year of 2030, the TCO for the 55 tonner electric model actually becomes 10% cheaper than diesel without considering any incentives. And for the 18 tonner, the TCO differential decreases to about 15%. So from this emerges a clear signal that the 55 tonner and the 18 tonner, they have an early mover advantage for electrification in India. And an appropriate set of policy interventions or incentives could actually make 18 tonner also TCO favorable in the coming years. So, and we also analyze the impact of different parameters on the TCO for different truck models in 2023. And it emerged that the distance traveled per trip has the most impact on the TCO values for across all the segments. And an 25% increase in the distance reduces the TCO by an average of about 14% across the truck segments considered. Here, the negative values in the red signify that the TCO of the electric model increases as we decrease the distance traveled per trip. And apart from distance, different set of factors affect the TCO for different models. So for the 12 tonner and the 55 tonner, as you can see, the road tolls exemption is the second most important factor that can help in reducing the TCO by about 12%. For the 18 tonner, it is the electricity cost that has the second highest impact on the TCO. And for the 28 tonner, this EV fleet discount interest rate, which is about 4% less than the base case, is the second most impacting factor for TCO. And because of the high capital cost of this segment, and also the low operating distance for this specific use case, like we saw in the table before. So we also did a policy and regulatory level analysis across the major markets for zero emission trucks. The US has adopted a mix of supply side regulations and incentives to increase the adoption of ZETs, like the phase 3 GHG emission reduction targets from model year 2027 onwards propose a reduction of 15 to 53% across different segments. The Advanced Clean Trucks Rule of California has set ZET sales target of 40 to 55% by 2035 in California. And along with these, California also has a heavy vehicle incentive program to increase the adoption of electric trucks. When it comes to the European Union, it has also passed the fuel economy regulations with a CO2 reduction of 90% by 2040 for uh, all the segments of the medium and heavy duty vehicles. And also has different countries have set up purchase incentive programs for electric trucks. When we come to India, India passed the fuel economy regulations for heavy duty trucks last year, and also has a same scheme in place to increase the adoption of electric vehicles. On the basis of our TCO analysis and the global policy review, we have developed a 4-pillared roadmap for zero emission trucking in India, which is divided across vehicle technology, infrastructure, financing models, and policy framework. So in terms of vehicle technology, as we saw, electric trucks emerge as the clear uh, dominant alternative fuel technology at the moment, and prioritizing the electrification of early mover segments which have a favorable TCO, including the 18-tonner and the 55-tonner, is the way to go. Then defining a zero emission vehicle technology also would give a clear market signal to the manufacturing automotive industry about the alternative fuel technologies which are going to dominate the market. In terms of infrastructure and operation, though India's logistics industry comprises of about 80% of operators which have less than 10 trucks. But there are also a number of large shippers and logistic service providers which could take the early move of adopting electric trucks. In terms of developing the charging infrastructure, we can involve the industry in planning and investing in developing DC fast charging infrastructure across major corridors, as well as depot charging for closed loop applications to increase the uptake of electric trucks. Financing is a major challenge when it comes to adopting the shifting from diesel to electric trucks. And a fleet discount rate applied to electric trucks, as we saw in the TCO, can bring down the cost by about 10% across the truck segments, which an interest subvention scheme could be a possible way ahead, in which India can draw lessons from the light duty vehicle programs. Then a risk sharing facility wherein there is coverage of the first loss or default for adopters of electric trucks could be formulated. The development finance institutions like SIDBI have developed such a risk sharing facility for 2 and 3 wheelers, and they are actively exploring expanding this model to electric trucks. Then longer loan tenures commensurate with the longer vehicle life of electric trucks, which is about uh, 3 to 4 years more than the diesel trucks, could also uh, help in managing the operational expenses and bring down the capex for the uh, people who own the asset. Then an asset leasing companies or asset leasing services are also uh, a kind of financing model which can help accelerate the adoption due to when the capex is not taken up whole by the logistic service providers. In terms of the policy framework, the shift to corporate average fuel economy CAFE norms for the medium and heavy duty trucks could lay a foundation stone for moving the manufacturing industry to shift to more alternative fuel technology, including electric trucks. And this could also be a enabling mechanism for uh, credits trading on the supply side of the uh, industry. We also need to support subnational regulatory action, which includes road tax exemptions and permits and entry barriers to urban areas, which has emerged a key enabler for adoption of electric trucks to uh, sort sort of accelerate this. And last but uh, importantly, a sales target uh, for the manufacturers could push the industry to produce more electric trucks and reap the benefits of economies of scale when the demand signal is there. So I would stop there.
Thank you, Rijal, for that presentation. We are now going to move into our Q&A section. So alongside Rijal, I'd like to welcome Ananya Banerjee from UC Davis to answer some of your questions. If you could both join me virtually, please. Welcome, Ananya. All right, so we have a couple of questions already. Please feel free to continue to add them in the Q&A function of Zoom as we go, and we will try and get to them. I have a first question that I'll perhaps pose to you, Rijal, from Vivek, who would like a little bit more clarity on the assumption that was made with respect to the upfront cost of trucks, which would go down by 55% in India by 2030. He has a question on the fact that battery manufacturing is import dependent, and so could you expand a little bit more on what you see as the outlook?
Yeah, so just to clarify that 55% of cost reduction for the upfront cost was something that came out from a global review of the studies across the markets of US, EU, and China. And in India, so in India also, when we see there are battery manufacturing facilities coming up, and also government is actively supporting the localization of the battery supply chains, which would definitely bring down the costs for electric trucks, since battery forms about 40 to 50% of the cost. So we see a clear reduction in the past 5 years and a further reduction in the next 4 to 5 years as well.
Thank you, Rijal. We have another question that I'll pose to maybe Ananya. This is with respect to a just transition for the medium and heavy duty vehicle sector. Do you have any thoughts on how this transition to perhaps electric vehicles or zero emission trucks, how this can be managed so that workers, drivers, repair and maintenance workers are included in this transition. The question, our attendee Harshit asks, points out that the vast majority of fleet operators are small businesses with very little capital. So how can we manage this in a just manner?
Hi, Amarti. Thank you so much for the question. I think in this supply chain, we do have like four ways of looking into it. First, the manufacturing part of it, which is where the vehicle technology is being prepared. Then the transitioning, then about the ownership, which is where the financing models or any other partnerships would be taken care. Then the regulatory side of it, which would actually enable the ecosystem so that the system can thrive and transition can happen. And then it comes to the ownership models for these vehicles. Uh, Now there are two things how we can empower this group of workers. First is definitely the skill development, which comes as the first phase of the manufacturing. There are many partnerships that we are looking into. We would also do have some industry automotive skilling center, which can help strengthening the skill sector of it to in the manufacturing side of it. Now, if we talk about the small fleet owners, this is where a large role has to be played by what financing models can come up, how we can de-risk the ownership. Because if we see most ownership is between most owners do have vehicles from 1 to 5 and they are in capital crunch. How can we bridge that gap to enable them so that the transition can happen and the financial load on them is kind of minimized? I think that's where the financing aspect should come into play. And aggregation will play a very larger role which is where we can kind of aggregate the demand and we can play more negotiation in the part. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Well, we have a slightly more technical question now that Rachel, perhaps I'll pose to you. We have a question from Yoshinobu who asks, can battery electric trucks meet India's range and payload needs? They point out that for 18-ton and 55-ton, for the two segments that we point out as early mover segments, roughly what percentage of the transport needs will they be able to cover in a target year like 2030? If you have any thoughts on that. You are muted.
Yeah, sorry. That in terms of how the battery electric trucks can meet India's payload needs, so there are considerable model development models which are available in the market with incorporating that increase in vehicle body weight, but a corresponding decrease in payload, which can increase the transport of goods for certain applications like the port applications or the FMCG and the cement sector and the steel sector. So the use cases which have the daily running requirement of about 300 to 400 kilometers, which is mostly the case for India's average daily movement across the segments like 18-tonner and 55-tonner. So there are models available which have the requisite battery size to support that kind of movement. And in terms of how much the share 18-tonner and the 55-tonner constitute in terms of road freight movement, so I would say an approximate number of about 25 to 30%, because the 55-tonner dominates the long haul applications across the major trade routes, and the 18-tonner is the dominant segment across the secondary movements, that is from warehouse to distribution centers across a wide variety of products and sectors like FMCG and e-commerce, etc. So definitely the it's not meeting the whole requirement, but starting off with sectors which are favorable and which can deploy trucks that give a favorable TCO is what we are looking at here. Thank you.
Thank you, Virgil. Perhaps we have another question. Let me just, this might be our last question live, but do please reach out to us if you have further questions after reading this report. So we have an attendee who asks about the logistics sector in India, which operates on very thin margins. If e-trucks can reach TCO parity by 2030, would they be attractive given the high cost upfront still, even if the TCO is working out in the long run? Would delinking battery, say through battery swapping approaches, make it more attractive? So what are your thoughts on managing this capital upfront cost? Would either of you like to take that question? Oh, we've been joined by Aditya Ramji as well. Please go ahead.
I can help answer that. Yeah, I think battery swapping. I think fundamentally the jury is still out on at least in the trucking sector. I think the very few applications we've seen so far are largely in China. At least in terms of commercial applications. What's challenging to still understand is system costs. So yes, theoretically, you can delink the battery from the vehicle, and on paper, there is, I mean, if you just do the vehicle analysis, there is a net economic benefit to be had. But what often we don't account for is what costs are incurred to actually maintain a battery swapping station, the inventory, etc. And then thinking about if you had to have a viable swapping ecosystem, and then if you actually amortize those costs and then build that into the equivalent of fixed charging infrastructure, then what that trade-off is. And I think those are still some pertinent questions that are left to be answered with good evidence. Yeah, I hopefully that helps answer, but I hope maybe that's not a very straight answer that you're looking for, but it's still very early days. And I think one of the challenges is that we had this similar conversation, at least in the MHDV equivalent was with buses. But it so turns out that pretty much globally now we've had fixed battery applications for buses, right? We decided to drop the whole battery swapping piece in buses almost globally. So I think that also kind of gives us some level of hesitancy on committing fully behind battery swapping for trucks.
Great, thank you. And so as a final question, we have a question on the Indian truck OEMs and their large sale volumes in Africa and the Middle East. And the question is, do you have any opinion on the impact of the regulations in India on the competitiveness of Indian truck manufacturers more globally? So I think this is a really great question to end on. Aditya, Ananya, would you like to take this? And perhaps I know you have a lot of work going on in not just in India as well, so please feel free to elaborate.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, and I think that's a very pertinent question. So I think yes, so the impact of any regulations that India has in the domestic market is likely to have some spillover effects in other regions, but I think this will be less about, I should admit, less about BEV regulations for trucks in India, as much as India's push to make the IC engine regulations for medium heavy duty more stringent. So the push on fuel economy regulations, etc., I think will have a far greater impact on being able to push some of that technology spillover effects in the export markets that India engages in. Because it's not just enough. Yeah, it's true. I think there's good evidence for this theory of change that primary automotive producers who supply to other markets, if there is a lot of potential, large scale domestic market transformation for them, there is a high chance of technology spillover effects. But you would then need some bare minimum floor regulations in those recipient markets also. It's unlikely that, let's say, Africa is going to see very stringent regulations on zero emission trucking for medium heavy duty ecosystems. So then that is where I think the crossover effects of being able to play around with the IC engine regulation will have a much stronger effect in terms of how OEMs respond to both India and the markets that they deal with outside.
Thank you very much, Aditya. I think we're a little bit over time, so we've reached the end of the webinar. Thank you everyone for your patience. Just before we close, to give you a little bit of an idea on the other work that ITF has been doing on road freight and beyond, would like to highlight a couple of things that might be of interest, especially given some of the questions that have come in the chat. There's a recent report out on how governments can bring low emission trucks to our roads and fast. That's the title of the report. It reviews which emerging technologies show the most promise to drastically cut road freight emissions. So if you're interested in a bit of a comparison there, please feel free to check that out. We also have a publication that's in progress that you can watch out for on financing electrification of heavy duty vehicles, including buses and trucks. There was a question on the role of public transport, and while this was not part of the scope of this work, this study might be of interest, so please do keep an eye out through our publication alerts. If you're curious about the rest of the freight sector, we do a lot of, we work across all modes and all kind of subsectors of transport. We have a recent report out on urban logistics hubs, and if you're looking at shipping, on decarbonizing coastal shipping, for example, as well. Lastly, if you have any interest in previous studies under this NDC TIA or NDC Transport Initiative for Asia project, we will include a link as well to a life cycle analysis study of passenger transport that we did, looking as in public transport as well as other passenger modes using a freely accessible life cycle analysis tool that you can feel free to check out. So with that, thank you very much to UC Davis, to Rijal, Aditya, Ananya for joining us today and to authoring this report. To all our contributors, reviewers, both at ITF, UC Davis, and externally, thank you very much. And lastly, thank you to Vatsalya Sohu, the Deputy Project Manager of NDC TIA, who has been managing things behind the scenes. So thank you very much. And lastly, thank you all for your attention and for your interest in our work. Please don't hesitate to get in touch with any of us. We will be including the contact details for all the presenters that you saw today in a follow-up email, as well as any of the links that we've shared. So do reach out with further questions if you have them. Thank you very much, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good day.